Hello, everybody, and good afternoon. I'm excited today because we have Andre. He is a wonderful member of our staff at Call to Peace Ministries, and we have a program that he is part of. I'll let him tell you a little bit about that, but it's called G5. And we don't talk about it a lot, but today we're going to talk about it a little bit, and I'm excited for that. So, Andre, can you go ahead and introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Thank you, Lauren. I'm Andre Turrentine. I am a church partner liaison with Call the Peace and one of the facilitators for G5, which is the men's abuse intervention course that we have had at least one for the last each year for the last since 2021. This time around, we will be starting that course on May 13th and go through the to December 9th. So, if you know men that need to be engaged um, and help them understand their abusive tendencies, um, connect them with G5, and you can do that by sending an email to g5men at calltopeace.org.
Yes, well, I'm so excited about this conversation because today we're going to be talking about how to communicate effectively with somebody who is abusive, possibly your spouse. Maybe this might be helpful for you as you're a counselor, if you're a pastor. So tune in today because if you've been through abuse, there's one thing that you know as you get out of abuse, it doesn't just end. You have to continue to interact with this person. And so today we're going to talk about how can you effectively communicate with somebody who's abused you, because it's really hard dealing with an abuser. It can be very challenging. They can hook you back in and then you find yourself triggered and everything's just escalating and going out of control. And so Andre, as a pastor, is a wonderful person of wisdom and with G5 experience is going to share on his expertise. And he's one of my favorites to call at Call to Peace Ministries if I ever have any questions. So I just know you're going to love this conversation and be able to learn from him today. So let's start with the first question. And that is, let's start from the very beginning. And that is, how can someone tell the difference between a conflict in a relationship and abuse?
That's a great question. And I know one of the challenging parts of that is that there should be conflict, or conflict should be expected in conversations, because what you're trying to do is bring ideas and thoughts together to develop some forward motion. And so when people have conflict in these relationships, it should be expected. However, if conflict seems to be manufactured, meaning that someone is trying to lead you down a path that you don't want to go, or that uh, you don't agree with, and there's no um, give to really work through where the disconnect is or where the disagreement is, then chances are you're dealing with an abusive situation. And let me say it this way: that is what an abusive situation looks like, when there's no give, when there's a hard press to get what one of those individuals want. They've got more power, they've got more influence, so they are setting the tone. Then that's an abusive situation. What makes that person an abusive person is that that's the tactic that they use over and over and over again. There's a history, there's a pattern that you can look to, and that's how it's best to identify an abusive situation. Um, but it's conflict taken to another level, and it's often intentional to
Yes.
bring and get what they want out of a conversation.
Oh, I love that. I love what you just said there. It's intentional to get what they want out of a conversation. So I that kind of leads me to my next question, and that is, how can someone maintain control of the conversation and protect themselves emotionally if they're, well, I would say if they choose to engage, but sometimes you just really don't have a choice. So how can we protect ourselves?
Yeah. Um, the 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 hook right there is the word control. It as at any point, if one or the other is starting to try to control the conversation, then it's not going to be productive. What makes a conversation is that you have two individuals, or individuals engaging in the conversation freely. once that freeness is gone and there's an expectation of punishment or penalty, then you've got a different dynamic there. If someone has the power to inflict pain, punishment, or consequences, then it's not a safe place anymore. Um, and what I've seen through G5 and what I've heard from spouses, just in the way that that appears, uh, it doesn't even look like it's safe. And the word says in Proverbs 9, uh, what is it, verses 7 and 8 or 6 through 7, it speaks about wisdom and
Hmm.
how to engage. A mocker, you don't want to be engaging in a conversation with a mocker. Uh, with a person that is wicked and has wicked intentions, you don't want to engage them either, because it just leads to more harm, and it's not productive. So you have to gauge whether or not it's going to be fruitful. Um, Sometimes there's a challenge to overcome oneself because you want to be vindicated, you want to be heard, so you want to make sure that you are that your point is taken, but a foolish person is not hearing you. So to continue to press and to try to deposit wisdom uh, in an environment where someone is intentionally being a mocker or a vindictive, and just using wicked tactics, um, it's not fruitful. So it's better to just disengage as best as possible. The less you say is probably the better for you in those moments.
Yes, the less is better. I love that. That's a good note to end on. And that
Okay.
kind of leads me into another topic of our conversation. And that is, I want everybody to listen to a key word here and I ask this: is it ever truly safe to communicate with an abusive spouse about their behavior?
That's one of those counselor questions where they respond with, "It depends." um, you This is where you want to be led by the spirit. There are some times I think that um you can set the stage. Um if it was me, I would be like, "Honey, there's something I'd like to talk to you about, if this is a calm, safe space." So you're setting the atmosphere that you're expecting. You want to cover something, but you need them to be calm, and create a safe space for you to do so. Um, Beyond that, it's asking questions that would lead them to be curious about what it is um, you're communicating. The Again, if you're dealing with someone who has wicked intentions and they're just going to mock you, then you know that this is not a conversation you want to have. However, if they are someone that may be in a mode where they can be curious, how did you see me yesterday at this time? And whatever their answer is, you've got to be ready for it, because it's a communication, it's a conversation. So you have to be open to them sharing whatever's on their mind, and it might be hurtful. I saw you as an enemy trying to attack me and take what I wanted. And you said, Okay, I agree with that, because that's the way you spoke to me.
Hmm.
However, my intention was to share what I thought was being helpful. Um, where were you when you spoke to me this way? Or where are you right now? And just try to let them answer. Open and ended questions are great. Not a why, but how, when, or where. Um, when I ask a where question like this, "Where are you now?" or "Where were you when you said this?" It's to bring them to a point, to the present moment, not when they were a kid and were abused, or not when some bully was jumping them, but right now. And okay, depending on their response, you can sort of gauge it. Okay, well, I felt like you were feeling like you were under attack, but in actuality, we were at home in a safe place, and I thought I was free to talk with you, and you came at me sort of sideways. Can you help me understand what was going on, or what you were thinking, or what did you want in that moment? Um, and the idea is to trigger their curiosity to get them talking so you can maybe understand them better. But the challenge is not to fall into a place where you're demanding that they see you, or you're
Mhm.
demanding that they apologize, because that might not get what you that's still more conflict. And
Mhm.
now they think that you're trying to get something out of them the same way that they were trying to get something out of you, or out of the relationship or the conversation.
Oh, I really like that. So you're trying to say too, it's not about getting them to apologize for something or to, it's more seeing where they are first before you be like, okay, we're going to talk about this behavior and try to make you feel, see how bad it is, and for you to apologize because that does not go well. That's
Right.
really,
Right.
really helpful information.
I think to add to that, it's you cannot lead them there easily. Some of these, I mean, it's a circular motion. The object is to try to help them recognize the fruit that they've been producing, how you're receiving it. And maybe if their heart is willing, they will start to be curious about what or why they're coming off the way that they are. Um, that's what we aim to do through G5, is to help them see the fruit that they've been producing. It's not usually it's not what they had intended. What they intended was to get what they wanted, and the tactics that they used were harmful. And so we try to help them see that, um, in as whimsical and in a safe environment for them as they might understand it, so that they can feel free to express what it was they were intending, and maybe see where they fell short in the process.
Wow, that's really good. And that kind of leads me to my next question. And that is, how do you differentiate? Sorry, I can't get my words out. How do you determine the difference between manipulation, like love bombing, and fake remorse, and genuine willingness to change?
That's a good one. I use I'm looking for the fruit. What fruit follows? Um, Usually, if it's love bombing, it's just there's nothing that's going to follow that. There's no action. There's no um, evidence of a desire to bring about change or to bring about healing. It's just a matter. Um, I'll give you an example. We've had some issues, and in our home right now with our teenager, where um, he has done something that he knows was not cool, and his method is to try to be charming and happy and approachable, and it wants to give you hugs. And if we engage there, everything is fine from that point on, because it's like, this is what I wanted. This is my signal that everything is fine, or at least we're past that hurdle, and there's nothing beyond that. The behavior still remains, and it's not productive. It's harmful. It's hurtful. Um, However, when there's another turn, when there's some more engagement, when there's some effort to lift the load or the burden of that hurt that was there, then we know that, okay, we're making some progress. And so the that's one of the things I try to bring attention to. I see you're trying to win me over. um, but this is how I would know that you're serious about changing things. This is what
Yes.
it would look like if things were changing. I would expect that this behavior would stop and this behavior would begin.
Mm,
So often when you're dealing with an abuser, they think just stopping the behavior is enough, but really what you're looking for is something to be put in place of that behavior, something that would bring about healing, something that would be restorative. And that's not always in their purview. So they need some help understanding what that looks like, what it sounds like, how you would receive it.
wow, that's really good. And the Bible verse that comes to my mind is we overcome evil with good. And so often when we want to replace an evil that is evil to control other people in our lives, we have to be able to replace that with something good. So I was thinking, like, that's really just powerful. Like, even in our own lives, too, in everybody's lives, this is
Yeah.
looking for,
Yeah.
okay, the negative behavior, but how can I replace this with good? So maybe could you give me an example of that? Say, I'm putting myself, not myself personally, but say I'm in an abusive marriage and
Yeah.
I am wondering, how can I say to him, hey, when you're controlling who I'm friends with, or, if you're not in a situation where you're doing things with friends that are, destroying a marriage type thing, but you're controlling who I'm friends with, what would be a way that you could reinforce him to take good behavior instead? And we're talking like when I go out with my Christian friends, like you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not like,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. Yeah. Um, there is a just okay to use that example. If if I could convey to him, first of all, I need to make sure that I'm not trying to convince him. Okay, I'm
mhm,
not trying to turn the tables or the conversation. I'm not taking on the responsibility to convince you that this is good. I'm not going to try to change my behavior and and heal the relationship because I haven't caused that wound. So, what I want to do is draw that attention. When you have, it feels to me that you are blocking me from expressing myself and having connection, building community. And that's really isolating. The more words we can use that define or have a definition beyond who he is. But what you're
mhm,
doing to me, your behavior is isolating. And I feel very lonely. I feel very small. I feel like this is like I'm suffocating.
mhm,
And I want to be able to engage with you, but there's something there that's hindering it. So I would like to be able to engage with my friends freely enough that I can start to glean and see relationships and how other folks are doing things to get along. Um, and I don't understand your purpose for blocking that.
mhm.
I don't understand your purpose for isolating me. And I need you to back off of that. And if you're going to change and make it clear to me, then it would look like you being a little bit more open or at least telling me when you like to do something so that when I have a plan, I can plan my day, whether that's to get with friends, to do something outside the house, to do something on my own away from you to to that benefits me.
Yes.
And that's where I would try to turn things a bit because otherwise he will say, "Well, okay, well, let's go out." You know, the answer is not, "Okay, well, great. Let's get together and go out with your friends. Let's get together and go out with this couple." The idea is that you're trying to establish space, safe space, space to yourself to do what you want to do. And if he's going to be in the mix, that's going to change it. So that to me that would be sort of a love bombing. Yes, okay, you want to go out with your friends, then let's do it. But that's not what you asked for. That's not what you're looking for. So to agree for him to go with you out with friends is not the solution, but to have him recognize that he's being controlling and isolating you from your friends and from your connections, and that's causing harm, and ultimately it won't be looking good, because at some point you're going to start pushing back in a different way, because you're going to want to be heard. You want to be who you want to be, who you are as an individual. And so if you can help him to understand how that behavior is impacting you and what a better behavior would look like, allowing me some space, give me some heads up about our timing. Let's agree on this day that I can use to fulfill my own wishes, and move forward. You know, the more specific you can be about how in your questions, how, what, where, or when, it gives you a better idea to identify the right answer. If you're asking what and he's telling you all these when questions answers, you know he's not answering your question, and that communication is not being fruitful. And there's usually a reason for that. What is that reason? That's where the curiosity needs to be.
So, if his reason for controlling a lot of times when we find that he isolates her is because maybe these friends are encouraging her to be more confident in herself and who God created her to be. And he doesn't like that confidence of not allowing him to speak to her in ways that are extremely dishonoring and disrespectful. And so, those are kind of the root things that you're saying there may come out and he's
Mhm.
trying to control. So, that's really
Yeah.
good. And we have, oh, sorry, keep going.
But
Apologize.
listen to the way you said that. He may be controlling because her friends are causing her to be disrespectful, challenging, or whatever to him. What he may think and be processing is that I want peace in our home. I want you to be in a good environment. These friends say things or do things because of whatever they think they know in history about him that upsets her. And he believes that she's coming back into the home upset. So, what's the answer to this? What would be a good response? Then I think you need to stop staying or hanging out with those friends. So you have to understand that his ultimate goal may not be as wicked or negative as you think. He just may not have the best tactic or strategy for bringing that together. So that's why that's how you have the conversation. He's got one thought, you've got another thought. How do we get these thoughts on the table and pick out what's sufficient? But I say all that, and you've got to hear me. So I want the meditation of my heart and what comes out my mouth to be honoring to God. That's the same approach that uh, uh, someone who's being oppressed wants to have towards their oppressor. Still, it's to please God. It's to keep God in the center. So everything that I've said in this segment is when the moment is right, when he is thinking clearly, when he's not being pressed, or when he's seeming to take a breath and be receptive to information, maybe you can share then. But you have to understand, if you're dealing with a wicked person and they've got wickedness stored in their heart, there is no sitting down and working out this reasonably. Everything I just said in that few minutes was reasonable. So if you're not dealing with a reasonable person and they only have the wickedness and the scornfulness in their heart, whether it's from childhood or from the a week before, you've got to be mindful of that, and assess whether you're trying to have a fruitful and safe conversation.
Wow, that's really good because yes, with an abuser, they're going to control you. They want you to be beaten down so that you remain under their control and feel bad about yourself, that you weren't a good wife, that you are not submissive enough, you don't have sex enough, whatever it is. And he doesn't want anybody speaking the truth to you outside of that. And so that situation is never going to make sense or be rational. But in a healthy relationship, you're saying this is how you function and work through that. So that's really helpful. And so how do we, I think we didn't just ask this one. Okay, sorry. How do we navigate the conversation if the person refuses to acknowledge their harmful behavior?
I send you back to Proverbs 9, 7 and 8. You cannot expect a mocker or a wicked person to produce something that's good. So you're paying attention to the fruit that's there. If they are interested in producing good fruit, then you can that's one of the things. It doesn't say that a good tree. It says if you want to make a good tree, that good tree will produce good fruit. If you make a tree bad, it will produce bad fruit. So there's something that we as believers can do to water and to plant good seed, but God gives the increase. So there's nothing you're going to do to make a person good,
Hmm.
but you can fertilize, you can produce the word in a way that they can receive it and sort of restore or store more of the good in their heart so that that's what comes out. But they have to be willing to receive it. I know one of the other questions that comes up is about accountability in these kind of conversations. How can I bring about accountability and help hold him accountable? There is the only person that's going to hold him accountable is himself. He's got to be open to be held accountable. And there's got to be something he's willing to be held accountable to. So there's no higher power that we control to make an abuser change or make them accountable all of a sudden. They have to be willing to engage there. So um, that's how you decide whether or not you're going to navigate a conversation. If he's curious, truly curious, and trying to understand why he keeps offending you or why he keeps causing you to cry or run in fear, then give him answers. But if he is you're he's just not violent or actively being abusive at the moment, so now is the time I'm going to approach it, it's probably not going to work out well.
Hmm.
It's what's on his heart. It's not going to be any more information that you give him
Hmm.
because there's no fruitful understanding. That's one of the biggest changes when we see the guys coming through this course, not just be seeking information to try to understand their behavior and or their wives' behavior, but when they make that switch to wanting to know Christ, to wanting to know God in a way, that foundation of wisdom, that's when their heart changes enough to start to receive the information. Because otherwise, they're just trying to look for another handle to use as a manipulating tool, whether that's you, God, or us as facilitators. Um, we aim to really draw their attention to the handles that they're already using, help them recognize whether that's productive or not, or whether it's causing harm, and then to offer the alternatives. Because for some reason it's the lack of trust in God and how he shows up leads them to want to take control themselves or They don't see you as a teammate. They see you as a tool or as an opponent, a challenger, and so there's no cooperation there. Everything is a challenge, and nothing's fruitful in that with that mindset. And so in their heart, we've got to reach down enough to say, see, challenge them. How do these things jive? You
Hmm.
know, get a clear understanding of how they identify love. What does that mean? How is that practice? And is that what you're doing? Is that what I've been receiving? Help me understand how to reconcile these things, because uh, that's what's confusing. I hear ladies say all the time, "I'm so confused." No, what's confusing is trying to tie in what he identifies as love and caring and providing to what you're receiving. If you don't believe that those are the same thing, there's a disconnect there, and he's intentionally trying to keep you from engaging on that topic, whether it hurts him, cause him shame, cause him to react in pain because of something current, or whether it was something that he dealt with in his childhood or somewhere in between. He's learned and received some things that keep coming out of his heart in a hurtful way.
Hmm.
Things that he's learned that weren't productive, but he thinks that they're still getting him what he wants right now. But over time, the people that if he were to look at it, he said there's several folks in his life that he used those tactics on that aren't there now. He may have changed jobs because those tactics worked against him in the long run. And many of these guys are surprised when their wife says no more, because they failed to listen and recognize that their tactics weren't benefiting them. So how can we let them know that early,
Hmm.
earlier?
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow, that's really helpful. And also, if we have time here, can you walk us through an example of a productive conversation with someone who's causing harm? Can you help me understand? Like, I know we kind of did that a little bit when we talked about um, with the friend situation and giving more time. So maybe a conversation. Let's focus on more of how you can talk to somebody about these behaviors that are upsetting you.
Yeah. Um, I tell you, questions is what I like to use the most. And if I can think of a couple of scenarios that sort of create two different pictures, and then sort of glean what I can from that. Um, there was once a guy in G5 where I asked the question, how do you um, express yourself, or how do you how do you display or present your displeasure with your spouse or family? And his answer was, when I'm not happy, I come in and I look around and I see what's not done, and I just do it. I will clean the dishes, I'll vacuum the floor, I'll put the furniture right, I'll get the kids ready for bed, and make sure their homework is done, and then get them ready for bed, and I just take care of it all. And he said it with that kind of on his face. I said, okay, well, how do you convey or express yourself when you want to, be a little bit more intimate and uh, together with your wife? He says, well, I come in, I take care of everything. I do the dishes, I vacuum the floor, I put the chairs in the way, I make sure that the kids are cared for and put to bed. And now there were a couple others that had their conversation in between there. So when he said that, he had no idea that he said the exact same thing. He expresses himself the same way, whether he's displeased or whether he wants to be pleased. it looks exactly the same. I said, "Do you realize that that's what you just said?" And you saw him his eyes go back and forth, and he realized that, and the rest of the class sat there and like, "Yeah, he just said the exact same thing. There's no difference between him being upset about what's going on and the way he presents himself when he wants to be intimate." You can't draw that kinda detail out unless you're asking questions, being curious, and paying attention to the answers. So that's what that conversation looks like. You set those things, okay, what is well, how do you engage someone that you truly dislike? And how do you engage someone who is challenging you to be more? And if they say the same things, that's the disconnect. He has no understanding. Okay, someone he truly doesn't dislike, he just truly dislikes is an enemy. But someone who truly is wanting the best and just wants to elevate his game and his station, so he's ultimately trying to help, but he doesn't want that help, he doesn't want that challenge, gets the same treatment. So how do you help him recognize the difference between the two? How do you say, okay, well, this is who I am? How do you bring him present enough in the moment to recognize that he's not being harmed, but he's being helped by the challenge? You know, so there's we often think linearly. We want to get from A to B, and so let's just get there. But sometimes these conversations go around a bit and take a little bit more time. And in that indirectness, they get to see the view that others see sometimes. But if they're not asking the right questions, that they're so busy trying to get you to think the way they think that they don't really see how that comes across. So pictures, curiousness helps to sort of get those things on the table so that you say, okay, so what's the difference between this apple and a banana? They're both fruits, but which one do you like? How do you like it? You know, what's giving here? You know, and a heart that's open and curious will start to recognize those differences and start to figuring out, okay, I need to put a little bit more work into understanding how I keep offending my wife. I keep pushing my children away. I keep stumbling over myself, and I'm not intending to. I don't know what that is. So what are the other tools that I can put to work here? One of the things that I thought about before when I knew that this we were having this conversation is I keep that the wheel, the feelings and sensation wheel somewhere pretty close to me. And if he's expressing anger, I want to get to be a little bit more specific. Is this pain or hurt that you're expressing, or is this um are you mad? Or is this something that's more fear-based? And a lot of times guys have never thought those things through. So the more tools they have, the more information that they have that describes what they're feeling might be of some help. It's one
Mhm.
of the things that we offer early on in our process is those tools, and we require them to use that language as we go through, um, in words that you're being abusive, you're abusing me may not be as receivable as you're making me feel isolated. You're making me feel afraid. You're making me feel um, like I don't matter.
Mhm.
because something about that abuse, especially the way that folks are speaking of it in the community now. Um, there's another community that's speaking and using those same languages in a different way.
Hmm.
What I'm saying by that is that there's a group of men that say if she's calling you an abuser, she's getting ready to take your money. She's getting ready to ruin your life. She's getting ready to uh, disrupt the way you're perceived in the community. If she's saying that you are a narcissist or any, that's why I tend to stay away from those terms that sort of identify and peg an individual versus the behaviors that sort of spell out and reveal an individual, you know, because it's about what they do that you don't appreciate, but you still appreciate them. But they can't always hear that. There's some that as soon as you say something negative, they're ready to turn and defend rather than to lean in and be curious about what you're saying and how or what they're doing that leads you to feel and think that way about them. So many guys get to move on to the next thing. They don't have to stay there and engage. They can go to another job, they can go to another church, they can go to another town, but they don't necessarily leave their wives to do that. They take their wives to the next town, the next church, the next environment. So they're still hearing the same message, but they're not getting it because they're busy running rather than revealing who they are or receiving who they are to make those changes. I'm sorry, I keep on adding words afterwards. So, what's
I'm
the
like
next question?
everything you say is mic drop. I'm just like, that's really good. I loved how you just said describing behaviors, and I've felt that this whole conversation you've put an emphasis on when we're communicating to them. We're talking about the behaviors. How are they making us feel? How can we direct them towards positive behaviors versus the negative behaviors instead of being like, you're abusing me, you're an abuser, like those things, they do not work, or you're narcissist, like that. Those are buzzwords that are just going to trigger them and make everything escalate and look really bad. So I really, really love this conversation and how thorough you're being. So please tune in if you've not listened to the whole thing. It's amazing. And we have one final question, and I'm really excited
Okay.
about this one too. It is, what does real accountability look like in communication, and how can we encourage it without trying to fix the person?
Yes. Um, this is one of those things that works because you're leading by example.
Hmm.
When I've offended many guys in our process, and sometimes I did it because I know where I'm trying to get to, and I know where they need to go, and I'm trying to push, and they think, okay, you really don't know me. I know the guys I've been working with, but they're right. We're just getting started. I may have just gotten to know them. So accountability in that situation is like, you know what? You're right. I don't know this about you specifically. So help me understand a little bit more. You know, and sometimes when I'm accountable that way, they know, okay, he's being safe, he's being accountable. I can call him out, so maybe I will allow him to call me out. Um, and so again, you can't make someone accountable, but you can be accountable. You can say, okay, I'm accountable for how I express what I'm feeling. And I know that last week when you said this, I was triggered and I called you every name in the book. I'm sorry. I it's not what I intended to do. Um, and I know that when I do that, it causes you pain because you aren't this and that I called you. but you're my husband, you're my son, you're one that I value, and I want our relationship to be better. So I hope you will recognize that as I'm going forward, I'm going to be working very hard, even if I'm triggered, not to go to that level.
Yes.
And if you see me doing that, I'd appreciate some kind of verbal uh, acknowledgement that I am holding on to what I said I was going to do. Y- that's leading by example, especially if that's how you walk forward. But again, anything beyond that is us trying to control someone else and their response, which is using their tools against them or using the same tools that they want to use against us. And so it's not productive. But if we hold ourselves accountable and express how we're doing that, then maybe they will take a few clues and see how it's working for them, or maybe they'll try that same thing for them. You know, um, that's a hard thing to do, though, when you're the
Yeah.
one being pressed and oppressed, to say, okay, I am going to hold myself accountable even in this situation. But we are here on Monday, Thursday, talking about this. And this is what Jesus did.
Mm.
Even though he was not the guilty one, he took accountability for all of our sins, for all of our trespasses, and he went to the cross without saying a word. He simply did what he came to do, what he was sent to do. And we're still talking about that today. We still honor him today. We still count that as a service to ourselves today. So it's not a little thing to hold ourselves accountable, to walk righteously, to be just, kind, and loving. If we will hold ourselves accountable to that, um, the enemy is it's a lot easier to expose the enemy.
Hmm.
He doesn't have anywhere to purchase on us because we are constantly being humble, constantly removing pride, constantly stepping up in our expressions of love and godliness in a way that's undeniable.
Wow. Wow, that's a really powerful closing and hitting there. Just thinking of Maudie Thursday, and just like my heart's like, having survived abuse myself and living in that situation. I'm like, whoa, those are really hard concepts. But it's so important, so good to learn to model those things that we want. And you're saying, I just, wow, everything you're saying, I'm just like blown away by, especially thinking of Jesus this Maudie Thursday. I'm like, thank you, Jesus. Like, we're the ones
Yes.
that were part of his abuse and oppression. Our sins allowed him to be abused and oppressed, and yet he chose to respond in a way that was contrary to what we deserved. So it's
Yes.
just, that's a very humbling thought in with a Maudie Thursday.
That's a real call to real Christian living. That's
Hmm.
being a real disciple, to follow Jesus that closely. And it's not easy, but it pays great dividends.
Yes. Wow, Andre. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And I have a few questions, and I'm going to jump on those and answer them in the comments because I can answer,
Okay.
we can answer those in the comments. But yes, I thank you so much for giving your time here today. I appreciate it so much. And I've learned a lot here. I'm like, I'm going to go back and listen to this and just glean from it again. It was so helpful and good. I thank you for it. On behalf of all the ladies, too, Gabriella is saying thank you, Andre. Your words of wisdom and knowledge are such a blessing to me. So we appreciate you.
God bless you all. Thank you. I appreciate
All
this,
right.
Lauren. I enjoy
Thank
every time we get to chat.
Yes.
Take
If I want to, they want to connect with G5, is it okay if I drop a link in the comments? Would that probably be a good way for them to be able to connect? All right,
Yes,
I'll
yes.
drop the link in that.
If you have that link that leads to all the information, it leads to that blurb that tells a little bit more about G5, and then leads into registration forms or getting connected
Oh,
with an advocate for that.
all right, y'all. So I'm going to drop that in the comments below. As soon as we end this live here, I can drop it in the comments and get that link. I have that link. So thank you so much.